So you want a tank. Yeah, you want a tank. You want to be big dick like Samiccus, running around as a blood DK, surviving everything, being immortal, being a leader. That's what it takes to be a tank. But it's not hard to get into. To be completely honest with you, there is a way to get into tanking. Ease yourself in, just put the tip in for now. The best tanks for beginners in the War Within. Let's see how we can get more tanks into this game to shorten our queues and get people started on tanking.
I bet you are tired of spending hours and hours each week trying to find people for your dungeon run or your weekly raids. Particularly the tanks seem to be an issue a lot of the time, so now you've come to us in the hopes of becoming a tank yourself.
We're a rarity. We're a rarity. That's the truth. Tanks are glorious people in game and in life, and you're just not going to find them everywhere.
But have no idea which one to play and why you should play one over the other. Your boys got your back with the best 3 options for a tank right here, so let's get you started and doing more content.
Wait a minute, what was that? What was that last one? Yo mama? Oh, it caught me off guard.
So let's get you started and doing more content right away.
Tanking your mom, yeah. Some badass animations.
The undisputed king of what it means to take it to the face in a video game has to be the warrior, particularly the protection warrior. It just so happens that Protection Warrior is also the best tank this season, especially for Mythic Plus, which ends up being a more difficult content to tackle than...
Yeah, Warrior is a good one. It's the OG of tanks. It's the one that people think of when they think of tanks. And if you truly want to just play a very simplistic... I'm not saying their rotation is simple, but just a simplistic version of tanking, right? Where you're just like sword and shield, armor, gather all that shit up, and just ignore pain. Yeah. Probably Warrior is a good way to go.
Rating. But why Prot Warrior for beginners? A few reasons, actually, and the biggest one is that it's easy to get into.
Yeah.
Prot Warrior is the most straightforward tank since all of its abilities and passives are very intuitive. You understand what it means to block damage, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you read your shield block ability, you understand that while it is up, you block all of the attacks. And when you block, you reduce the damage of the attacks by a certain amount, based on your shield. On top of this, you have abilities like Shield Wall, Spell Reflect, Spell Block, a taunt ability called Taunt. It doesn't get more on the nose.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's all about just damage resistance, ignoring damage, just doing damage mitigation. That's what it's all about. Whereas there's other tanks where you really got to heal and do the proper things and shield at the proper moments compared to like if you're getting hit with magic damage or physical damage. Warriors are just like, it's all damage and you ignore it all the same way.
This. So just from an understanding point of view, Prot Warrior already eliminates a large barrier of entry for new people when it comes to learning the spec and what buttons you should press, because nobody has to explain to you what Ignore Pain is for since it's in the name. On top of all this, if you played a tank style character in any game that's not WoW, and I say this because if you have been a WoW player for more than a week, you already know about Prot Warriors, then you would 100% understand that having a lot of strength and wielding a big ass shield is going to make you tanky, just as how supporting us on...
Can I say something though about Warrior? Sam's an expert, a spec he's never played in a class never. Well, I do know a lot about Warriors just because I'm a blood DK. I play tanks, so I typically know about what's going on in the tanking world because I want to know who's doing the best and what the best abilities are and whose spec is the best right now for tanking. So yeah, I keep up with the other tanks a little bit, even though I don't play them. But a Warrior, by the way, I was going to say, probably some of the best transmogs. I'm not going to lie. If you want to look like a big beefy boy with a huge shield and sword, Warrior takes the cake on that one.
Patreon gives you access to content that doesn't make it on YouTube, like bloopers from our recordings, because I talk a lot of shit you don't actually get to see in the final edit. But of course, you can also have custom 4K wallpapers made with your very own character, early access to content, and our undying gratitude since Patreon does a lot in helping us make our content a reality. Just saying, the link is down below, click it and see if the perks can spike your interest.
I will say, Zorro, the thing is, a Warrior is not necessarily just easy to play, it's easy to start playing. I think there's a high ceiling where you can be like an amazing warrior tank versus somebody who just started by becoming more skilled at playing a warrior. But to get started, the floor is pretty low. I think you can walk in as a warrior. Like you said, the abilities are pretty intuitive, and you could play as a warrior tank pretty straightforward.
Warrior is also one of the easiest tanks to play when it comes to your rotation and mitigating damage and doing damage. Pretty much every button is good to press at any time, in a broad sense of course. If you are starting out and you are spamming Shield Slam and Thunderclap with no regard for your humanity, you are likely going to generate a lot of rage, which is a good thing, because with all of that rage, you will hopefully press your shield block and ignore pain.
Side note, I also feel like Warrior's the easiest one to hold aggro with. I think Paladin's probably pretty good too at holding aggro. Blood Decay is actually pretty damn hard. Blood Boil is undertuned at times and you can't hold aggro too well, but I feel like Warriors, typically they can hold aggro pretty well. Just keep Thunderclap in your cheeks, basically.
If you spam them, you stack their duration and effect, up to a cap that is, but likely you won't hit that cap unless you are fighting easy content. And if you are fighting easy content, having an inefficient uptime on your shield block won't matter that much. As for your cooldowns, they have baked in defensive values, but all are offensive cooldowns anyway. And as with the DPS spec you likely were playing just before, you fire these whenever they can be pressed. The faster you do this, the more you get to do it, and the more you get to do it, the tankier you are, and the more damage you end up doing. Only upsides. The defensives cannot be spammed, of course, but that is true with all tanks and all specs in the game, honestly. And you clearly won't press Spell Reflect when dudes hit you in the face with their swords. What I'm trying to say is that it's hard to mess up playing Prot Warrior, and it's hard to look at your abilities and not realize what they are supposed to do and what the intent of them is. Of course, for the nitpicker, you can always optimize your buttons more, and indeed, not pressing everything every time without a second thought would be ideal to up your level as a Prot Warrior. But that's true for every spec in every game everywhere. Optimizing your actions will make you better, but not optimizing your actions will not make you worse than other specs in the game.
That's what I mean. High floor, like low floor, high ceiling, right? You can become really good at being a Prot Warrior and differentiate yourself from somebody who's a beginner. Right, it'll be obvious to anybody who's running a Mythic Plus who's been playing their Warrior for a long time and who hasn't. But the floor is low. Like getting into a 2 with a Prot Warrior, I think you'll be able to survive. Should be good.
Hence why Prot Warrior is good for beginners. And let's not forget that it's one of the fastest specs in the game.
Is this just a bitch out Samiccus video right now? Jesus Christ, I tank for you guys every day in fucking raid, and you guys just want to shit all over me. What a great community I've built.
That your rotation is super engaging and fun, if you like that style of gameplay, of course. The feedback of spamming your buttons, getting a lot of rage, spending it on being the tankiest boy in the game, and dealing loads of damage is very satisfying, and in my opinion, one of the best entry-level tanks for anyone looking to take up the role of a tank and have some good fun. Right now, statistically speaking, it is the #1 tank in Mythic Plus dungeons and at least A tier level for raids, which in modern times are not as punishing as they used to be. It's tough, it's meta, it's simple. Prot Warrior should be your first stop if you want to start tanking with no idea where to begin.
Druid.
But maybe you want a better tank in raids.
Don't do is just claw swipe constantly. Isn't that they have one ability, right? There's just one ability. They just keep pressing 1, 1, 1, 1 over and over. It does damage and holds aggro at the same time. That's it.
And almost just
Summarize
as good in
this
Mythic
section
dungeons.
perfectly.
Bear, or Guardian Druid, would be the second best option for a lot of the same reasons that Warriors are. It is a very close contender for the #1 tank spot. It is incredibly tanky and does a lot of damage. Out of all of the tanks, you will have the most amount of armor.
Look, what's he doing? You see how every time you see that swirly claw swipe, he's just clicking the same ability over and over. It's brain dead. That's it. I'm just saying.
Bear, meaning that passively, the damage you take will just be way lower than everyone else's. It's also simpler than Warrior, if you can imagine. You have Iron Fur as your mitigation that also costs rage and the occasional frenzied regeneration to heal you for the damage you took. These are slightly easier to use than the Warrior counterparts. First of all, since your Iron Furs can stack indefinitely, although you won't actually reach that cap that easily, and as long as you have rage, you are never wrong to spam the ability if your goal is to survive. Second, Frenzy Regen has a cooldown and heals over the course of a few seconds, making sense not to spam it to avoid wasting the heal from the previous one. Similar to Warrior and all specs in the game, of course, there are ways to play better without spamming, but saying that to someone that is just starting out is a bit redundant since it's not the point of the discussion.
So, kind of like Warrior, you know, you can get in there and just spam it over and over and, you know, tank your way through shit early on and then get better at the Druid tank later on. That's it. That's all we're
Bear
saying.
also has Bark Skin, the crowned best defensive in the game overall. It has an incredible short cooldown of 34 seconds with 30% damage reduction.
Oh my god.
If you swap some talents around, it can be a 45-second cooldown with 40% damage reduction.
40% damage reduction, holy crap. That is really good. Damn.
That lasts for 2 seconds longer. No other tank has access to a defensive cooldown as strong as this one this often. Bear is also arguably easier to play than Warrior, so much so that a lot of people don't like the spec for that reason, while others like it for that reason. Simple versus complex is an individual thing, and I don't know what you like, but I can tell you why simple is good in this context, especially if you are a new tank. Having fewer things to think about, whether it is about your utility or your rotation, will free up brain space to learn external things like dungeon mechanics, casts to kick, frontals to position, packs to pull, taunt swaps to do in raids on bosses like Sikrin. And once you learn all of the external stuff and still feel like Bear isn't fun, cool, and furry anymore, you can hop on another tank.
He had to say it. He had to. Yes, if you're a furry lover, I mean, this is the tank for you, obviously. You know, it's everything. Furriness gets put into everything these days. What are we going to do? Death Knight? Hold on, what the fuck? What is he saying? Death Knight? Death Knight is not easy. What is he talking about? Oh no, this video just took a turn. I was having a great time. Now this is about to ruin my day.
And that one has to be the Blood Death Knight. Listen, if easy and strong is not your jam, if simple and strong also doesn't fit your criteria, then let's go a bit rogue and take a different approach here. Blood Death Knight is the most unique tank since you are...
He fucking gave bits to say that to me right now. Sam's debuff, Sam's defensive buff is 40% hair loss for the next 25 years. Probably 100% of the next 25 years, I'll be honest.
Are almost 100% self-reliant.
Bone Shield,
Through the sheer design of your mitigation, Death Strike particularly, you will be healing almost all of the damage you take.
True.
I keep saying almost a bunch of times because in reality, if the healer never heals you and you know what you are doing, you won't die. But there will always be niche situations, exceptions, where you cannot go in blind, expect the healer to remove you from their frames, and still be fine. But in the grand...
I've literally broken keys doing this. I've literally broken keys where the entire party is raging in the chat because I've decided to, you know, take about 7 to 8 minutes to kill the boss myself. And why do I do that? Like, why, you ask? Why would you? It's because it's a big dick moment. It's a moment where you just lay your dick on the table, put it on full display for everybody to see. Look at it all. It's so glorious. Look at this. I'm killing it by myself. I'll see you guys later. You know, yeah, I've done it. I've done it. Okay? And it's great. It feels good.
And scheme of things,
but you got, to be fair, you got to know what you're doing to be able to survive that long on your own. That's not just a brain dead play. You got to know how to rotate your defenses properly, what the spells are that the boss is casting, and what the best defensives are to block them.
Death Knight, you will likely be the last one to die in a party of people, or sometimes never die at all. It also plays a bit differently than the other tanks,
not if you're
almost
not
like
really.
a DPS spec. The main tank thing you will likely want to do is to make sure you have bone shields up, which takes very little effort to do. There are multiple spells and mechanics that consume and regenerate shields, and usually with one Marrow Rend during your Dancing Rune weapon window, you get a full load of bone shields to last you for quite a bit.
Right.
You definitely press Marrow Rend way less than any other tank's mitigation ability. You'll be pressing your Death Strike way more than any other tank's mitigation ability instead, though. Your Death Strike...
Here's how often you press Death Strike as a warrior. I just got to show you guys this real quick, okay? Here's my mouse that I play with. Can you guys guess which number on the number pad is Death Strike? It's the one that's completely worn out and no longer has a number on it. Yeah, so it's that 4. Number 4 down there. Yeah, right there. That's my Death Strike button, and it's been worn to shit, essentially. Yeah, you're gonna push it a lot. 69, yeah, 69.
Because the only resource consumer you have, so it's kind of hard to mess it up. But not as hard as the other two, where with Bear and Warrior you can afford to spam your rage consumers more. With Blood, you might want to be a bit more conservative. You won't want to cap on your runic power, of course, but you don't want to spam your Death Strike just because you have runic power.
True.
The way this works
and the way Death Strike works is it's been revamped a lot. You cannot just overheal with Death Strike. Basically, you got to take damage to heal damage almost. So timing your Death Strikes right, especially in raid, if you know what the boss is going to do, timing it right with the big hit and then follow it up with a Death Strike right when you get that big hit, you will really you'll just heal to the max. That's why you guys see me sometimes. You know, I'm pulling like 1.6 million healing, and I'm like, where the healer's at? You know, it's because you're timing that shit perfectly.
Calculates the damage you took in the last 5 seconds as you press it, and then heals you for a very high chunk of it.
Exactly.
After that, if you press it again, it will be very weak.
You're not gonna do shit
until you take a new batch of damage that will be calculated into your next Death Strike. The game tells you this already, so you know, on the personal resource display or through WeCars if you are a user. The fun part of Blood is always having runic power for a Death Strike, and then whatever damage you take, so long as it doesn't outright kill you, you can heal it by just pressing Death Strike shortly after getting hit.
The most fun thing about playing a Blood DK, no doubt, is you do feel godly. You do feel like you are nearly invincible, and yes, unless there is like some kind of rage mechanic or something, you're probably going to survive it if you time your shit right.
And this is the tanking part of it. You also have Grips, which is a unique Death Knight ability where you pull mobs towards you. This means killing adds in raid or big dungeon packs will be way easier when there are those caster mobs that just never move unless you move them. Blood also has Gorfiend's Grasp, which is a strictly Blood Death Knight ability where you grab everything into a neat little pile.
Yeah.
This is a bit more niche, and
I'm not spec'd into it. I don't think a lot of people spec into Gorfiend's Grasp unless you're specifically specking for like Mythic Plus runs or something. But I use Slappy Hands mainly for this.
Used with purpose in content since it takes a talent point away from some power you might need as a tank. But it will be something people will want you in their group for.
What's up, Uzar?
Overall, the rotation and toolkit is fun, albeit a bit more engaging than the other tanks, while the self-sustain just gives you a feeling of relaxation and badassery from knowing that you don't really care how good your healer is as long as he or she doesn't let the other people die. In today's world of taking forever to find groups for dungeons and raids, being a tank is the easiest solution of simply playing way more WoW than as a DPS player, which is a plus in and of itself. Changing mains, however, is always a choice you need to think through. Sometimes it's good to do, sometimes it's not, and we have a video about it here where I talk about my personal experience of changing mains as a Mythic Raider and what you need to consider when doing it.
Great video, yeah. So, I mean, I do wish more people in the game tanked, no doubt. I feel like there's a lack of tanks, and it's because really tanking, there's a lot on you. In Mythic Plus, people are expecting you to know the path, to understand which groups to pull and how to pull them, and how to line the sight and do all this shit. And if you don't know those things, you are going to get bitched out. You're going to get bitched out, so you got to have thick skin, especially early on in tanking. When you first start, just know, don't take it personal. You're going to get torn to shreds. People are going to bitch at you constantly. But once you get good, you're going to have those moments where you clear Mythic Plus, you do a great job, or you kill a boss in raid, and people are just spamming the chat like, damn, God tank, what a great tank, oh my God, it's the best tank ever. You know, you're going to get those moments too. So it's not for everyone, but tanking surely is fun, and that's why I do it.